All right, we're going to talk about cloud computing. Specifically, we're going to talk about what is cloud computing, why cloud computing exists, and basically what needs it fills, who provides it, who are some of the biggest providers of cloud computing tools and solutions, and a little bit about what the different types of cloud computing are. So, first of all, what is cloud computing? This is a very popular sticker. There's, in fact, a blog post about how popular the sticker is. It's that popular. And it says that there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer. And that is absolutely true. Cloud computing is essentially renting storage, computing power, or servers from somebody else. And all it is taking someone else's computer and paying them to use it. In a whole bunch of different ways, it always comes back to paying someone else to use their computer. Why does it exist? It exists because it's expensive to run a server. You have to purchase hardware. You have to buy server racks. You have to have a room to put it in. You have to pay for the actual server, the RAM, the processor, the hard disk space, and all that stuff. And you have to then pay for software licenses. You have to buy Windows if you're using Windows, or, well, if you use Linux, then you don't have to buy that software, but there may be other software. You may pay a support contract for enterprise Linux or any sorts of things. You have to power your servers. You have to power the air conditioners that keep your server room from overheating, because computers get hot and generate a lot of heat. And then possibly most expensively, you have to pay for people. You have to have dedicated IT staff on site who are able to fix things. And you have to have backup hardware and backup servers. You have to have training for your IT staff. You have to pay benefits. You have to pay salary. People are expensive, and they are a big part of the cost of running a server, or if you're a large organization, running a larger server room or even a data center of your own. The benefits of the cloud: you get economies of scale. By paying to rent someone else's server, someone else who is renting out their servers to a lot of different people, they'll have the dedicated IT staff to keep things running. And you get the benefit of not having smaller IT staff at many organizations and just have a bigger IT staff at one large organization that's specialized in doing this. You get virtualization in the cloud. Now, you can have virtualization inside your own organization. There's nothing that says you can't do that. But you're definitely going to be using virtualization, so you get the benefits that virtualization provides, like the ability to easily set up and take down servers. You reduce that need for dedicated IT staff inside your own organization, and with cloud computing, you pay for what you use. So instead of having a large capital investment of buying a whole bunch of servers that may be used to 10 or 20 or 30% of their capacity, with cloud computing, you can pay for exactly what you use, and if for some reason your needs decline and you need less, then you reduce what you're using and immediately reduce what you're paying to your cloud computing provider. It's fantastic for a startup business that doesn't want to have the capital investment of having to purchase a whole bunch of servers, hire that dedicated IT staff. For a startup, you don't have to have necessarily any specialists in infrastructure. As you get larger and want to scale your business, you probably want someone who can specialize in optimizing those things. But at least at the beginning, you don't have to have that capital investment, and you could just rent a server and start making what you want to make. So here's a kind of a tier list of cloud computing. At the base, we've got infrastructure as a service. And infrastructure as a service, well, we'll talk about what each of these mean in a little bit more detail coming up here. But infrastructure as a service really is the base of this pyramid, and that's the most in-depth cloud computing, where you're going to be doing the most for yourself. On top of that, you've got platform as a service. And a lot of platform as a service providers actually use other infrastructure as a service providers. And the same goes For software as a service providers, the peak of this pyramid, software as a service is providing a software product for purchase or rent through cloud computing, and many or most software as a service providers are actually using platform and infrastructure as a service to run the software that they are selling to other people. So starting at the base of the pyramid, infrastructure as a service, really that comes down to you are essentially purchasing or renting a virtual machine. So essentially, rather than running your own server, purchasing a server and putting either a bare metal operating system on there, you purchase a virtual machine, and you can do everything with that virtual machine that you could do as if it were your own server. You can also purchase database services and things like that, but the crux of this is purchasing that virtual machine and being able to do anything that you want with that. And there are a bunch of providers of this, and we'll talk about it a little bit. A lot of these providers, like Amazon Web Services, has solutions at other layers as well, same with Windows Azure. But really, the core of their business is here at the infrastructure as a service level, where they're providing virtual machines, virtual computing power for you to use for basically whatever you want. So again, Amazon Web Services, Windows Azure, Rackspace, DigitalOcean, there's hundreds, but these are some of the biggest providers of that infrastructure as a service. Next up, platform as a service. This provides a more limited subset of capabilities. So rather than having an entire operating system that you can do whatever you want with and install whatever software and run whatever applications you want, you're purchasing a smaller machine with limited software, limited applications installed. So you're a little bit more limited in what you can do, but if what you want to do falls into what a platform as a service provider gives, then you can get typically cheaper, and it's much easier to configure. So rather than having, if you wanted to run, for example, a Ruby on Rails site, rather than having to figure out your Rails deployment and install Rails and make sure all the security patches are installed for the operating system and for Rails and for all of that stuff, you turn that over to, say, Heroku or OpenShift, and you say, you manage Rails for me. I will just create the application. So you are creating the application, coding in Ruby on Rails or whatever, without having to manage the security patches, without having to manage database security necessarily as much as you would as if you were using infrastructure as a service. And again, Heroku, OpenShift, Google App Engine are some of the big providers here of platform as a service. And again, these platform as a service providers, a lot of them are using infrastructure as a service to run their stuff. For example, Heroku could be using Amazon Web Services and their infrastructure as a service to manage their needs and to run the machines. The machines that you're connecting to might actually be running on Amazon Web Services. But you would be paying Heroku, and then they would pay Amazon Web Services for whatever you need. The last tier here, software as a service, there are thousands, maybe millions of software as a service products. And they're the peak of the pyramid because all they're doing, they're the most limited subset. It's just a tiny bit. You're not programming really if you're using software as a service. Some of them you are. If you're using Salesforce, for example, you're doing a little bit more programming. If you're using Google Apps, you might be. If you're using Dropbox, probably not very much. But all software as a service is an application that you're purchasing through the internet, typically for a fee. Often they'll have a free tier, so Dropbox has a free tier. Google Apps, you can use Gmail for free and Google Drive and all that. Slack, I know, has a free option as well. And then you'll pay if you have a larger organization or have different needs. So for Dropbox, for example, I know the free tier provides very limited storage, and if you want more storage, then you pay them. And you can pay Dropbox $10 a month for a terabyte or something like that, and pay them, if you're an organization, a certain amount of money for each person in your organization to use this Dropbox storage, and they'll provide more storage for that. And those, again, typically use Amazon Web Services. Now, I know that Dropbox, for example, moved off of using Amazon Web Services to actually providing all of their own infrastructure, but others, like Slack, are likely using Amazon Web Services or possibly even a platform as a service provider to run the application that you are then connecting to. So the lowest tier, again, is infrastructure as a service, middle is platform as a service, and the highest tier there is software as a service. So risks of cloud computing, it's not perfect. There are security concerns for a variety of reasons. One, because of that loss of control. So by turning over some aspect of your organization, you're placing your trust in Amazon or Google or Dropbox that they will do what they say they're going to do and that they will keep that information secure. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the cloud is less secure than an on-premises system, because with an on-premises system, you would have to be maintaining security and doing all those same things yourself, but it's placing that trust and losing that little bit of control of your own and placing that trust in another organization. There's other security concerns as well. For example, with any of these providers, you are sharing space. Now, an important duty of a cloud computing provider, Amazon or Salesforce or Dropbox or whoever, is to keep their different customers' information separate. So you don't want, if you have Microsoft paying you for Dropbox space, just hypothetical, I'm sure they don't, but if you have Microsoft paying you for Dropbox space and Google paying you for Dropbox space, you don't want Google customers to be able to access Microsoft customers' data. And the same goes the other way. So keeping those separate, and that's a security concern, whether you're paying for Dropbox, whether you're paying for a server, whether you're paying for platform as a service or renting a VM, any of those, you have that potential for a security breach if things are not configured correctly on the cloud computing provider's end. And the last risk we'll talk about here is vendor lock-in, especially for software as a service or platform as a service. If you start putting a lot of your data into Salesforce, then you are, in some instances, stuck there, and there's a switching cost if you wanted to switch from Salesforce to then managing your own customer relationship management stuff. And that's something that you have to consider when you're going in. And again, no matter what system you use, you're going to have some amount of lock-in, but you want to take care that you're not forcing yourself to be forever using a provider, because those providers can change their prices or they could go out of business. And you want to make sure that you have access and can get to your stuff after that happens. So some other security risks, or a risk, I guess, not a security risk necessarily, but an outage, for example. If AWS goes down, a lot of people are in trouble, and a lot of services go down with it because they're relying on Amazon Web Services for their stuff. So in this article from 2015, Netflix, Tinder, Amazon, IMDb, all of them are relying on Amazon Web Services. And while it doesn't happen often, nothing's perfect, no technology is perfect, and sometimes it's going to go down. So when Amazon Web Services goes down, that affects a lot of things. If your cloud computing provider goes down, that's going to hurt. And possibly the most painful part is when your cloud computing provider goes down, there's nothing you can do but wait for them to come back online, unless you have alternative options and a backup site and a backup provider and things already configured, which is something to consider. So cloud security threats, there's lots of them. An important one for Amazon Web Services is making sure that your keys for Amazon Web Services, essentially your password to use Amazon Web Services, is not available, because as this top article here says, you can have a $50,000 Amazon Web Services bill, because if a criminal organization gets access to your AWS keys, they can spin up as many virtual machines as they can and start doing whatever they want, whether it's denial of service attacks or mining Bitcoin or whatever they want to do with that service, and it's on your head, and it's on your wallet, your credit card, and you have to pay for that. So we talked about what is cloud computing, we talked about why it exists, we talked about who provides it. There's tons of different providers, And we talked about the three different types: infrastructure, platform, and software as a service. So that's a brief overview of cloud computing.